Hello and welcome to Season 5 of the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. For the past few years, we've been digging deep into the history of hi-fi, as well as how geopolitics and socioeconomic forces are shaping its present realities. This season, we'll also start to look at hi-fi and audiophilia with an eye toward the future. What's this hobby going to look like as demographics shift? What can we do to bring in new enthusiasts? How will the gear and the hobby itself evolve in the coming decades? To discuss the possibilities, here's host Jordan Guth and this week's guest.
Hello and welcome to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. Today we are playing part 2 of the conversation that started in the last episode with Paul Hales, the CEO and product designer of Pro Audio Technology, as well as Theory Audio Design. So if you're coming into this conversation and you're a little bit lost, go back and listen to last week's episode where you'll hear the first half of this conversation. Paul, basically what you're advocating for is accept the space in which your system is set up, because that will play a psychoacoustic element in what you're listening to. Your perception of the space, how your ears are hearing the space before you listen to loudspeakers, is going to impact how you perceive the sound coming from those speakers.
Yeah,
So
we adapt to the space, yes.
We adapt to the space. So no space shaming. Just accept that and kind of go from there. Now,
go ahead.
Other piece that I'm kind of curious about is it seems like you're also kind of advocating for this idea of no sweet spot. So I've heard speakers that literally, like, you move your head an inch one way or an inch the other way, and they just, like, the sound changes drastically. It sounds like you're advocating for the speakers to be able to cover any listening space in the room.
Well, so if you have a good loudspeaker, a well-engineered loudspeaker, and let's just say that follows the CEA 2034 stuff, right? Like, look, Floyd spent his entire lifetime studying this for us, and he's given us all the data. Unfortunately, not everybody has absorbed all of it. And I mean, fortunately for us, our competitors don't seem to follow a lot of it. But if you design a speaker so that it has, and I'll just say it, whitish dispersion, okay? Meaning not any kind of line source, pointy, high Q control. If it has wide, broad dispersion and well-behaved off-axis performance or power response. So if people don't know what we mean when we say power responses, it's the response. It's like the response of the entirety of the sound that comes out of the speaker in every direction, right? So in my warehouse, we got 50 by 60 by 30 feet. We hang a pendant that has really smooth, even power response in there. And what that means is that all the reflected energy coming back is also smooth in frequency response, right? There's no peaks and dips. There's no truncated top end making it sound muffled, right? The reverberant sound doesn't sound like this. It sounds like this, right?
Yeah.
It's just lower in level and it's delayed in time. So if you try to make high Q, the sound, high Q meaning aim the sound and tighten the dispersion, you're only going to be able to do it at the middle and upper frequencies. And so you're guaranteeing that this power response sounds like this. Real instruments, real humans don't have that quality. When you listen to a human, it's a broad 180 degree kind of pattern, and you've already adapted to the acoustic environment you're in, right? And so this notion that you could EQ a hi-fi system and remove the effects of the room that you've already heard and adapted to is ridiculous. You can't do that. It's just a tone control. The only thing that's changing is the frequency or the spectral content of the reproduced sound, and maybe the delay, right? That's the only thing these things can do. But the room is not changing, and you've already adapted to it. So let me give you another example, because there's so much stuff I want to say. But there was a demonstration of a new technology, quite sophisticated, quite technically impressive technology to control bass inside of listening rooms, right? And fundamentally in the context of surround sound movie playback, right? And to demonstrate what the technology could do, they, without it turned on, we were all sitting in the different seats, and there was probably maybe 20 seats in this smallish kind of demo room. And so everybody was in a different location in the room, and they just played this very, very slow sine sweep. So it started at 20 hertz and just took like 20 or 30 seconds, maybe even more, 40 seconds to get to, the higher frequencies. And as the frequency swept up in my chair, it was very easy to hear. It got loud, and then it would get quiet, and then it got loud again, and it would get quiet, and you could hear the peaks and dips of the standing waves as the frequencies changed, right? And everybody in different seats obviously heard the peaks and the valleys at different times, because at different frequencies, right? And so then they turned the technology on, and they did the same sweep, and it was very obviously more uniform. Okay. So it was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And then they played movies, and it just sounded wholly unnatural and like any other surround system I've ever heard, right? And so it just sounded heavily processed to me.
Interesting.
Yes.
Now, if that was just an audio track, do you think, like, when you take your visuals out of it, if you weren't looking at it, do you think it would still sound as heavily processed?
Yes, because for the reasons we've already discussed, right? If you, in real life, if somebody hit a bass drum in this room, I would get the impact and I would get the reverberant sound of this room. What this system's going to do is it's going to make the impulsive parts of that bass drum unnatural, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to strip out sound that the room is going to reinforce for more sustained signals. And so now the impulsive part is no longer natural. They pulled energy out that needs to be there. The room hasn't canceled it yet, right? And then the more sustained low frequencies would be also unnatural, because if I had a real bass instrument in this room, it would reinforce those. So let me ask you guys a question, okay? Here's your scenario. You've got maybe it's a movie scene or whatever. You've got this wealthy couple. They're throwing a party for whatever reason. They got this great big house, and they got this great big, great room, and they're entertaining. And during this party, they're going to open it with some soprano operatic singer that's going to do a solo, piece, and then. After that, they have a jazz trio, maybe a stand-up bass, piano, and drums, or guitar, stand-up bass and drums, whatever it is. And then after that, when people have had a drink or two, they're going to roll the DJ in. He's going to set up some speakers, and he's going to start to play music, right? So which one of those musical sources inside of that party are you compelled to room correct? Does anybody feel like they're going to need to correct the instruments or the human? No, only the speakers. Why? They're all sound sources. They're all sources of music and entertainment at the party. And the only ones that we feel like, oh my God, this room is going to destroy the sound, of this performance, is the audio one.
Interesting.
Right?
I think there's an element there where the speakers are already an imitation. They're already one level removed from the reality of the instrument, that because they're removed, we try to bring that essence back as much as we can. And I think, well,
you just basically said, fix the loudspeaker, make a better loudspeaker. That's what you just said, Jordan. You just said what we try to do is make it closer to the real thing. Fix the speaker, improve the speaker, not get rid of the room, not, you know what I mean?
Well, okay. So maybe I'll pose this then, because this season is about the future of hi-fi and kind of where we see it going. Is there technologies that, like you just gave an example of a technology that sounded good in theory, but in reality, once you're actually there watching a movie, it didn't perform the way that you expected? Is there technologies or areas that you think can kind of give us closer to the reality of the live instruments, to the point where room correction isn't even a question. We just have speakers that are good enough, and I'm going to possibly say affordable enough. I know that might not be a reality, but is that a
Well, let's
possibility?
consider the reality, though. Let's consider, like, how much would you have to spend on these speakers
You-
that
you-
don't
you-
need any correction?
You don't have to spend that much. That's the beautiful part. And so this will tie back into the whole DSP thing. This is where DSP is beautiful. So look, a good speaker, and I've been saying this for years too, a good speaker is a good speaker is a good speaker. Because there used to be, and maybe there's still this conception that, oh, these are for live sound, so they have to be this way. And this speaker's for surround sound movies, they have to be this other way. And then hi-fi needs to be this way. And the reality is what makes what makes a good speaker, what makes a speaker good is accuracy. And so the only thing you need that will differentiate the kinds of speakers you use for different applications is, do you have the bandwidth you need and the dynamic range you need? Can it go loud enough, right? So as you go down in dollars, you're going to sacrifice bandwidth. Okay. Sure. That's just a reality. However, there are really good speakers that are under $1,000, and they tend to be the self-powered little studio monitor speakers. So, I know, Dennis, you follow Aaron Hardison.
Oh yeah.
Look at his measurement of Neumann speakers, and some of the little inexpensive sort of buy them, put them in your bedroom studio kind of speakers. They're really well engineered, and they can get that performance out of an inexpensive speaker by the good application of DSP. So Jordan, the answer to your question is yes, DSP will make all of this stuff better. And what will happen, and what should happen, and what I hope happens, is the speakers get better and the room correction schemes are less necessary, right? Because we could go down the list of the 5 things I did in my rant, but all of those are based in fact. It's just they're physics.
They're good technical points. I mean,
they're laws
every
of
single
physics.
one of them is a good technical point. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
And I think it's the idea of, like, there's right, and then there's it's factually accurate, but then for the experience for the average person, and kind of Dennis gave the example of, like, well, without using, in his case, DRAC, without using that, there's some distracting stuff that's happening, and, like, I wish it wasn't there, but I can't change my room, and I this is my option, or this is my, like, I'm gonna say it, the lazy way out, right? I still,
the affordable way out is the way I would have put it.
maybe the affordable way out. But I think there's an element there, and I mean, we've talked with you before about, like, would you ever make speakers that are more home or hi-fi centric as opposed to the custom install and these larger sound reinforcement ones? Like, there has to be another way out that isn't going to necessarily break the bank and put you into the stratosphere in price or in size, and give you the ability to kind of get the best possible sound out of the space that is your current reality.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's so much stuff I want to address here. So let me see if I can tie in the subject of sort of the future of hi-fi a little bit. I think it is going to be more self-powered stuff. I think you're seeing that already, right? You're seeing, Focal introduced that speaker that was fully active.
Utopia.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see more and more manufacturers move that direction. What will happen to hi-fi or consumer hi-fi in the future is a big topic. I don't know that we'll have time on this one to dive deep in that. But I do want to address kind of wrap a bow around this room correction thing, because there's a lot of things within audio. I like to point out that we have an iPhone in our pocket. We have artificial intelligence, but speakers haven't changed in 100 years. And that sort of uncertainty around acoustics and audio and reproduced sound and stuff has led to, I think, a lot of misconceptions and different understandings about this sort of same stuff. There's more, I think, disagreement among loudspeaker designers than you would find among amplifier designers, for example. Amplifiers are more finite. Acoustics is hard, right? And a lot of these concepts we're talking about, your experience may go counter to it. So, or you using what Dennis said as an example is, you have a fondness for these systems because in your experience they've made things better for you, right?
Mm.
And that's fantastic, right? That's what this stuff is for. Um, but I think also what happens is you we get into these habits of listening for particular things, and we focus on that aspect of the performance, and we lose sight of the different aspects of performance. So Dennis, if you had a bothersome standing wave or a note that was distracting to you and you turn the system on, it's likely that it improved that aspect of the bandwidth of the signal, but something changed over here you didn't notice because you weren't paying attention to it.
Could be.
And,
Yeah.
and let me give you a story. So we did I think I've said this online before too. We did a very elaborate home theater room about 15 years ago, like $1 million room back in 2008, right? So $1 million room back then, that was a big boy room. And very large room, engineered by a well-known industry consultant, lots of chairs in there. And we went in there, we deployed a big pro system, and I set it up the way we set it up. And then the consultant came in and spent 2 days EQing the room. Now, he didn't use an automated system. He was the system. And so he took the measurements and he moved the microphones around and he looked at the results and he listened and he did a bunch of stuff. And he was paying attention to the seat to seat variation that Dennis mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And so he would sit in the chair and I would see him lean over and then he'd make a comment like it, sounds pretty good here, but it sounds like shit here. And I'm like, I think it sounds the same in both places, but okay. And he spent 2 days trying to get the seats to measure the same. And, God bless him, he did a good job. They all measured sort of similarly and stuff. And so we were sitting there and I was playing a movie that we would play and I wasn't playing it very loud. And the dealer is like, hey, Paul, can you turn that down? And because the sound was kind of annoying and it wasn't very loud. And I was like, well, Peter, we would normally play it way louder than this. And so that was the first clue that I had that, oh my God, I don't know that I'm going to like this result. And then this will tie in all the stuff we've been talking about in the low frequencies. We used to, at the time, we kind of have a grand finale when we do pro demos. And historically, it was a Ginger Baker drum solo from a Cream live recording, right? And now we use an Imagine Dragons clip. But this drum solo I know really well because we played it hundreds of times in our own demo facility. And it's him in his drum solo. He's hitting the tom-toms and he's kick drum. The way the mixing engineer chose to do it is they mixed only the kick drum into LFE. All the tom-toms were mixed into the left, center, right speakers.
Okay.
And he gets going and at the end, he just has both feet and both hands going as fast as he can. And usually you have this machine gun of impact sound coming at you. Every kick drum hit, every even tom-tom, you could feel the tom-toms. And in this $1 million room, after he had EQ'd it so extensively, there was literally no energy in the air at all. There was no acoustic energy. And I sat in there and all the walls were black. And it was a very big room. It was 16, 18 feet tall and, 35 feet wide. And I felt the sensation of the low frequency energy kind of coming from the black surfaces, right? And there was no visceral impact at all, except for my chair vibrated, right? And so I didn't feel the acoustic impact. The only visceral sensation of the sound at all was my chair would, I would see him do the kick drum and my chair would vibrate. But it didn't, the concussive wave didn't come at me from the stage. You go to a rock concert, it hits you from the front, right? And I turned to the consultant and I said, get the kick drum out of my ass, right? It's not supposed to be in my ass. It's on the stage. My eyes tell me it's up there. right? This is a rock concert. I'm supposed to feel it come at me from where the drums are and where the PA is, right? And so in EQing the crap out of it, it became so unnatural and distracting to me because my chair was vibrating, but I wasn't feeling any energy, acoustic energy. This is what I talk about with Todd. And so this ties in what I was saying to you, Dennis, was that he was listening for one particular thing. He wanted it to sound the same in every chair, right? He didn't notice that it became completely unnatural. And he probably didn't care because he was focused on, well, I'm getting the same experience in every chair. While I'm going, oh my God, I can't even watch this thing because it's distracting me because the kick drum's underneath me. It's in my butt. Right. And so I couldn't even enjoy that system. I would not watch anything in there. And to him, it was perfected because every chair gave him the same experience. And so we were listening for different things. And what I'm saying is what Todd experienced at Cedia was he went to all those other rooms and experienced heavily processed sound. And that's what people have adapted to that, and that's what they're used to. He came down to my room. We hadn't done any processing. I played the bass drum, and he goes, "Oh my God, how did that acoustic wave just knock me over 25 feet away?" And I was like, because that's how we do it, and that's what we listen for. So
I mean, I'll say this: like one of the reasons that I'm an advocate of not running room correction above that sort of 2 octaves above the transition frequency of the room is because it is almost impossible for me to do it in such a way that it doesn't sound processed, and I cannot stand that processed sound, right? It's just it's in the best you can hope for is that it is sort of like as close to neutral as possible. I still think you're going to get better results setting a max filter frequency. But that said, in deference to you, my friend, I will look. I've on my NAD system. I can with a flip of the switch turn the Dirac on and turn it off, turn it on and turn it off. And again, I've been focusing on that sort of like distracting quality. I've been focusing on the note to note variations and things like that. But I'm gonna reapproach it. I'm gonna go back to my very carefully tuned, minimally DSP'd system, in which right now I turn it on and I go, yeah, that sounds better, but I'm going to listen closer. I'm going to listen and see if there's anything that I'm truly missing, because look, I've got to acknowledge there may be something that I'm missing, or there may be something that I'm sort of prioritizing and optimizing or what have you, but I'll give it another listen, see what I think.
Yeah, and make sure you optimize the position. So that's the best thing you could do in a room is put the subs in the right place if you can, right?
Yeah.
And then do the Dirac thing and then turn it on and turn it off and see. You may still prefer it on. And look, I'm going to throw some love at we're real close with Storm, with Trinov, and Storm has Dirac, Trinov has the optimizer. Look, these are smart products. I like the Dirac art, right? And it's restricted to 150 and down, I think, and that's why I like it. So where I differ with you, Dennis, a little bit is the 2 octaves part. I would limit it to just the Schroeder frequency and down, or maybe 200 or 150 and down in any room, because once you go 2 octaves above that, you're in the heart of the mid-range, and that's a really important part of the spectrum. So the instrument fundamentals and human voice fundamentals and the first few harmonics that give everything the timbre, it's right in that range, right? It's like 80 hertz to 800 hertz. That's where the heart of the sound, the timbre, the tone color is, right? And you start messing with that and you pull the tone color out, you get the harmonics wrong, and that's when it starts to be disinteresting. But
with Dirac though, that max filter frequency is not like you hit a brick wall. It starts to transition. So as you're approaching that point, it's doing less and less, especially with regard to the frequency domain. So 2 octaves gives you most of what you're doing is below the transition frequency, right? And then from there to the 2 octaves above, it's almost just a sort of handoff.
Oh, just so like smoothing in, easing into there.
It's really just a smoothing thing. So
well, look, and that's smart too, right? And there's a lot of smart schemes out there. I just we demonstrate here at our showroom and at every trade show we go to what happens when you put good speakers into bad rooms, right?
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
I'll say what I said before is most likely the limitation on your system is not your room, it's that your speakers aren't good enough, right? So just get better speakers. But before we run out of time,
Yeah.
let's go through the 5 things I pointed out because I'd like to get your guys' feedback on these, and they're intended to be just factual. So if anything I say doesn't seem right, then jump in and point it out. But the first point is, you know, system EQ or room correction, if you want to call it that, can't correct spatially variant signals, right? You can't pick one processing for one chair in the room and a different processing for a different chair in the room. So the husband and wife can't have their optimum processing. Only one person gets to have it. Do you agree with that?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So, room correction cannot correct both sustained signals and the transient signals that haven't yet hit the room. You know what I mean? Like the direct sound hasn't encountered the room yet, and all the reverberant sound has been affected by the room. You can't fix both of those separately, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, third, microphones do not detect the sound field the same way humans do. Microphones can't distinguish between reverberant reflected energy and the direct energy, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
100%.
As far as
Okay.
I
And this is an obvious one, but these schemes can't change the acoustic properties of your room or the dimensions of your room, right? The room doesn't change. The room stays the same. We'll all agree on
Correct.
that. Okay.
Correct.
And then lastly, and this is again the list. There's probably 5 more I could add on here, but yeah, I mentioned it already. Is you can't EQ the reverberant field and the direct sound independently, and you're changing them both at the same time. And what you're doing is you're measuring the reverberant field. You're applying EQ based on that, and you've just changed the direct field by the same amount, and it hasn't been impacted by the room. So if you think you're saying my room is doing this to the sound, and I'm only correcting that, that's nonsense. You're also making the changes to the direct sound that hasn't encountered the room yet, right? There's no room for the direct sound.
Well, I think this is where maybe we start to not have a disagreement because I don't disagree with a word of that. But I think that the point that I would make is the frequencies where I would advocate for using room correction
Mm-hmm.
effectively and selectively and judiciously
Mm-hmm.
is not as big a distinction between direct sound and reverberant. It's. I mean, there's not a lot of direct sound below 250 hertz. Do you know what I mean? With regard to the way subwoofers and speakers put energy into the room.
Yeah,
So
and look, I agree with you that this is best used in the low frequencies, right?
yeah, yeah.
And when I was talking to Floyd at speaker camp, it
Name
was good. This
dropper.
is the best. This is the best camp I've been to. We had wine there and stuff.
I love it.
We
I'm
had
gonna use-
grown
I'm
up
stealing that one.
drinks and stuff. So I said, if you EQ in the bass for sustain, standing wave stuff, you do so at the expense of the impact, right? And he goes, so what do you advocate? Doing nothing? And I said, basically, except I'll tell you when I think you can always benefit from it. And we had to use it at Cedia. So we had a square room, 30 by 30 by 15, and we put the big 21-inch subs as close to the quarter points of the front walls we could, right? He showed us, Todd Wolte, I think, showed us that you symmetrically place them across the room center lines, and you get to sort of, not energize all the modes, right?
Mhm.
And but we also had a 15-inch sub there, and it had to go in the middle, not for any kind of audio setup reasons, but we had speakers all across the front where this was a trade show and we needed to show it, and that's the only place it made sense to put it. It's the only place it would fit. Okay, now that's a bad place to put that sub. And so what that did is it energized the mode left and right and front to back really effectively, right? It's in the position to maximally excite that mode. And we had a 42-ish hertz drone everywhere. Okay. And
Hmm.
so we pulled some 42 hertz out and it tamed that. Now, the key word in what I just said, guys, and think about this, is everywhere.
Mm.
Okay. That's why it worked, is because we were fixing a problem that was everywhere.
Mhm.
If it's spatially variant, then you're paying Peter to you're robbing Peter to pay Paul or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So as long as people are aware of these limitations, the microphone limitations, the spatial
Yeah.
variation limitations, all that stuff, then I don't have a problem with it. If you like it better, you think it sounds better, um, then God bless you, do it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I did it in the car. I diddled all the knobs until I got a full kind of pleasing sound that was kind of open and around me and stuff. And so my
Yeah.
enjoyment factor tripled, right? But still the recipe is get better loudspeakers, right?
Well, yeah. But you
Yeah,
know what? One of the things I wanted to say to the last point you made was like Dirac also will look at the multiple measurements that you take. And if there's a problem that's only showing up in half of those measurement positions, it will very much deprioritize that,
yeah,
right? It is mostly going to focus on the problems that show up at literally every microphone position or maybe all but one. And then
okay.
it'll even like show you like that measurement position, there's something weird going on there. And I have used that at times to go, okay, I got to make some big changes with the layout of my room because what is that one measurement position doing? That doesn't like I've got to fix that. I've got to make it to where I don't have that one anomalous measurement before I'm going to be using DSP. But again, Dirac does a really good job, in my opinion, of prioritizing those things, and it's going to put more effort into fixing the problems that show up at literally every measurement position. And again, if it's only showing up at one or two, it's going to be like, nah, we don't need to be messing with this.
Yeah,
So
no, that's smart. That's good that they recognize that. I
yeah,
think when the people do it, when the human beings are moving the microphone around, or look, a lot of people what you do, and they do this in commercial cinema. You set up multiple microphones in different
mm,
places, and the smart analyzer can average them for you, right?
yeah,
Hmm.
And
yeah,
so the curve they see on the screen is an average of all those seats. And then I think I said in my world's longest comment, YouTube comment, the idea of correcting an average is nonsensical, right?
right,
Correct. The word correct implies exactness, and average implies the opposite of
mm,
exactness, right? And
yeah,
Yes.
so look, you got to understand these are all points on a continuum. What I would say regarding that low frequency stuff is, and you have to learn that it's unnatural, but people have adapted to the unnatural sound of EQ'd low frequencies from audio systems, and they don't know that it's unnatural. You got to experience it when it is put back, which is the experience Todd had. How did you get that bass drum? Nobody else's system could do impact like that. There was no air energy in the air. And so if you're used to that lack of energy from the woofers, the acoustic wave, not
mhm,
the like I think the way he described it is I heard the impact, but I didn't feel the impact, right?
mm,
You have to experience it not there, right? And so like, and this is what's so hard and challenging about audio, right? Is you get used to something and then you adapt to it and you think it's right. It's kind of like breaking in, the speakers breaking in. Like Floyd likes to point out that, it always gets better, right? It's not the speaker breaking in or the amplifier breaking in.
You
It's you
just get used
adapt.
to it.
Yeah,
yeah,
you adapt to the sound, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, and that's what happens in sound reinforcement. So I'm going to take this same sort of controversial sort of battle of that arena next, where everybody's kind of come to expect the sound you get from line array PA systems, right?
Sure.
And and um it doesn't have to sound like that, but people think that that's just kind of the nature of those systems, and that's what's unfortunate in audio is people adapt to performance that could be otherwise improved, right? And that's why I think I'm vocal about it is we don't have to do those things. We know enough now to not do those things. And so we just have to, one person at a time, influence people to see it a little differently. And I promise you that if you heard a movie upstairs in our big theater upstairs, and then you heard it in a system that had one of those EQ schemes turned on, your experience would be quite different.
Yeah,
we get this impact and this dynamic contrast and stuff that you're not going to get if you do the processing, right? You may prefer the sound with the processing, but I promise you that the naturalness of the low frequency concussive kind of sounds will be diminished significantly when you process it, and for the reasons I described, right? And so one of the other things I said at QSC 25 years ago, and they looked at me like I was a Martian, was if you're trying to apply EQ to your audio system to overcome or negate Mother Nature, then it's going to come off unnatural, right? Think about how just draw on common sense. If you're trying to get on top of the reality of the acoustic environment you're in, it is going to be unnatural, because the natural thing is the acoustic environment that you're in, right? So again, I've walked into this room. If Dennis walked in and talked to me, the signature of this room, which I've already kind of like subconsciously, acclimated to, and he speaks to me, it's going to be Dennis talking to me in this room, and he's going to sound like Dennis, and I'm going to be able to understand him, and we're going to have a great conversation. If then you try to process Dennis to accommodate for the acoustic properties of this room, he's not going to sound like himself anymore, just like the piano won't sound right? So if you tuned an musical instrument based on a room acoustic properties, I promise you that instrument will no longer sound right. And for the same reason, don't do it to the speaker. Just get a better speaker that sounds more like the instrument, right? So the best chance I have of reproducing the piano is a speaker that is so accurate that it basically timbrally doesn't change a single note in that piano. And then the differences that remain would be the directivity differences between the two, right? The piano is going to have a different frequency-dependent directivity than my speaker, and that's true, and you pointed that out, Dennis. But still, you're going to be much closer. And I conceived of a scheme a number of years ago where the speaker could adapt its directivity to the instrument it was playing. So the whole concept of reproducing sound was different. You would have a speaker for the drum kit, and you have a speaker for the stand-up bass, and you have a speaker for the singer. And then those speakers would adapt to the directivity of those instruments. And then you would have unbelievably convincing audio in the room you're in, right? So you're living in the room you're in. Quit trying to negate the room. You can't do it. It's just going to sound unnatural. It's just, sorry. It's just kind of where I come from, right?
I mean, I think this entire conversation has given me so much to think about and just wrap my head around, and I love it. Paul, we're way over time, as we normally are with you, and I love it because every time it's a great conversation.
I'm loquacious, if nothing else, right?
Before we say our goodbyes, I gotta ask, what are we listening to these days? What do you got for me, Paul?
Yeah, you're going to think this was staged, and I promise you it's not. But actually, believe it or not, I've been listening to Rush.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is not at all because you're Canadian.
It's totally because we're Canadian.
Yeah, well, it's partly
I'm
that.
not Canadian.
But yeah, you're not Canadian. But no, so how it happened was, look, the very first concert I ever went to was Rush. And when I was 12 years old, I went into the 2112 tour. My brother-in-law, who was much older than me, took me and my friend to see Rush, and it was kind of life-changing. And so I was a rabid Rush fan from, 77 to, say, 1990 or so. And then I kind of drifted away. I started listening to The Cure and Tears for Fears and grunge. I got big into Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and all that stuff, right?
And later Tool.
Yeah, and then I'm still obsessed with Tool. I have a funny story about Tool too. And so, but why Rush came back on the radar? I'm sure you guys know they're going back out on tour, and they hired a new female drummer, And I like watching the Rick Beato YouTube channel. I know you guys are aware of that. And he just interviewed Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, right?
Oh, no way.
I don't know if you saw those, but
No.
that brought Rush back onto my radar. And I thought, maybe I should give that 1990s, 2000s catalog a listen. And so I dove in and started to listen to the albums that I didn't really get exposed to because I kind of moved away from them. So I listened to the stuff from like 93 to 2010 or whatever it was. I'm still trying to warm up to it a little bit. I still think they're, I like the Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, Signals, Grace Under Pressure era most.
Sure.
But I am definitely listening to Rush. And then I can't answer this question without also mentioning Tool, but I recently decided that I was going to listen to Fear Inoculum start to finish. I hadn't done that in a while. And so I put it on, I popped my AirPods in, my AirPod Pros in, and I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. This is crazy. Why is this so good? And I remembered I had just eaten a gummy. So I highly recommend eat a gummy, wait about 45 minutes, put that record on in your head, and then just go along for the ride. Oh my God, so good.
See, I almost agree with you on this one, Paul, but I'm going to say take the gummy and listen to Anima, which is the greatest album of all time.
That is a great album too.
Number one best album ever made. So
that is also a very, very good album. Any of those albums, I think that the thing about Fear Inoculum is they're a little bit more experimental with the textures and the time signatures and stuff, but there's great music on Anima too. Yeah.
I love it.
Anyway, sorry I was so verbose.
No. Love it, man.
Yeah,
love it. And I have to say, I'm still a proponent of Dirac done well, done judiciously, done thoughtfully.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everybody who takes my advice about Dirac should also listen to you to understand the conceptual limitations of all of this and why it is not a panacea. I'm still a huge fan of Dirac. You're not going to take that away from me, but what I get frustrated with are the people who think that it is a complete panacea, and it is not. It is optimization. It is give and take. It is about minimizing distractions and
go in with your eyes wide open.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a magic button, but look, I don't disparage any of the companies that sell these things or make these things or the proponents of them at all. I just, hopefully people have a little bit better understanding of what they're really doing and how and what the limitations are. But look, this discussion's been a lot of fun, guys. I loved it. So,
Paul,
thanks
always,
for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
and if you keep on offering to come back, we're going to keep on having you back. So just as a heads up.
Yeah, well, look, I've been accused of liking the sound of my own voice, so I'm guilty of a lot of this stuff, right? So, look, I enjoy talking about this stuff. I enjoy learning about this stuff. I enjoy getting different perspectives on this stuff. Like, it was valuable to hear Dennis's positive experience with it, right, and how it helps him. So, look, if you're willing to have me back, I'm willing to come back.
Heck
we'll
yeah,
take
man.
you up on
Brett
it.
and I have got to have you on Audio Unleashed as well.
That would
We
be
keep
so much
talking
fun.
about it,
That would
man.
be so much
Yeah.
fun because he likes to rant like me. So
Yeah.
you can get him and me both ranting. That'd be good fun.
I
Yeah.
won't have to speak.
The marathon episode upcoming.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Take care and all the best.